Welcome to another edition of We're Not Doing a Podcast alongside Mark Weber. I'm Jared Least. And Mark, the other night, our beloved New York Jets, quite frankly, played one of the most embarrassing games, quite frankly, we've seen in a long time, even though we're quite used to the Jets playing embarrassing games, especially in prime time. But the Jets right now, they're 4-4. They have a pivotal game this coming weekend on Sunday Night Football against the Las Vegas Raiders, in which, in all likelihood, if they lose this game, their season is pretty much over. And that really just raises the question with the quarterback, Zach Wilson, who in year 3, it's well established he is just maybe the worst quarterback this league has ever seen. So, Mark, I ask you, how short does the leash need to be for Zach Wilson on Sunday night when the Jets take on the Raiders?
I don't think very short at all. And I'll tell you it this way. What is their alternative? The problem with the Jets is that they did not set themselves up right for an alternative for Aaron Rodgers. Zach Wilson, just throwing him out there, was never going to work out if Rodgers went down. And quarterbacks, it's very hard for them to stay healthy. So by having Tanner Boyle out there would not help the Jets. Having Trevor Siemian out there would not help the Jets especially well. How the Vikings were able to get Josh Dobbs so quickly after Kirk Cousins is just detrimental to a team like the Jets and makes Joe Douglas just look incredibly incompetent because Zach Wilson, as you mentioned, not the worst starting quarterback in the NFL, but he's one of them this year. And clearly there is no backup plan. And sadly, Zach Wilson is your best option for the rest of the season, just given what they have on the roster.
Well, at this point, I don't think he is. I think he is the worst option because Trevor Siemian, you got to try something. And that's what you bring up the point that you just brought up when it comes to the incompetence of Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh. Quite frankly, people need to be fired over the lack of activity that the Jets have made when it comes to the backup quarterback position. They should have addressed it in the offseason in case Aaron Rodgers got hurt. Okay, you put all your eggs in the Aaron Rodgers basket going into the season. It's unfortunate what happened, but you had an opportunity at the trade deadline to go get Josh Dobbs, to go get Jacoby Brissett. In the offseason, you could have signed a Teddy Bridgewater or a Gardner Minshew, and they just simply failed to address it. And it's the second year in a row in which you were wasting a honestly historic defense that the Jets have. It's a Super Bowl caliber defense, and you were just wasting all this premier talent that you have. And quite frankly, I'm just sick and tired of the Jets thinking that the rest of us are all a bunch of dummies. You have Robert Saleh, who at this point I am just so sick and tired of. Quite frankly, because of the handling of the quarterback position, he deserves to lose his job. And whether it's unfair or not, because I think he can be a solid head coach in the NFL, he has just turned a blind eye and just lied through his teeth over and over and over again about trying to sell us that Zach Wilson is improving. He's getting better. Sure, he may have been getting better from last year in which he was so god-awful to this year in which he's less than god-awful, but still awful. It's just a joke. It is an absolute joke because there's no team in the NFL that would want to face this Jets defense in a playoff game. But they're probably not going to get there because they just continue to trot out this train wreck of a quarterback over and over and over again. And they just think we're all a bunch of dumb idiots. And that's the thing that drives me the most crazy about this whole situation. They think we're stupid when we're not.
The thing is, why would you blame Saleh so much and not Joe Douglas? Douglas deserves the blame over Saleh. Saleh is just using what he has, because when your options are Tanner Boyle and Trevor Siemian, Wilson does seem like your best option, and it does make sense to start him at quarterback. But then look at a team like the Giants. They're at least bringing guys in that are big name guys whose careers haven't panned out, but you can still take more serious than Trevor Siemian and Tanner Boyle. Matt Barkley, former five-star quarterback on the active roster potentially. Jacob Eason, another five-star quarterback. These are guys that played for big name schools and probably maybe never had the best chance with where they were when they got drafted to the NFL. And they could make it work. By bringing in Trevor Siemian and having Tanner Boyle on your roster.
Tim Boyle.
Oh, Tim Boyle on your roster. It doesn't help. Who does it help? Wilson, unfortunately, is your best option.
The thing that bothers me even more, though, is the Jets seem to have a contingency plan for every other position outside of offense. They didn't go into the season really addressing wide receiver all that well. Alan Lazard, I thought, was an overrated player to begin with. And they should have signed a guy like DeAndre Hopkins in the summer. Odell Beckham Jr., he hasn't really worked out for the Ravens, so I'm not mad at that. But, for example, you look at a guy like Al Woods on the defensive side of the ball. He tears his Achilles. He's out for the year. The Jets go out and they sign Perrion Winfrey to their practice squad in which he may be activated. So they seem to have contingency plans for other positions except the quarterback position. It's just pathetic how they continue to coddle the psyche of Zach Wilson. It's 3 years in the NFL.
Jared, they have to. They have no other options at quarterback. Zach Wilson is their best option. He is terrible, and the fact that he is your best option is a disgrace, and it lies solely on Joe Douglas. Because not only did he fail to build depth at the offensive line position, which we clearly saw with the Aaron Rodgers injury on the fourth play of the game, he did not build depth when it came to the quarterback position. He should have got rid of Zach Wilson for pieces when he had the chance, and he did not. And now, as a result, Wilson is their best option. I don't even know the full name of the backup quarterback for the Jets. I thought he was Tanner Boyle for the longest time.
Trevor Siemian's better.
Boyle, the guy is a nobody. Trevor Siemian.
He's better.
Go back to be working in real estate.
He's better.
Not an NFL quarterback.
Trevor Siemian's better than Zach Wilson. He is.
I don't know about that.
He is.
Based on what?
He's had a better NFL career than Zach Wilson. And you can't just keep trotting out the same thing over and over and over again. It's the literal definition of insanity. They just keep playing him week after week after week. Trevor Siemian has had a better NFL career than Zach Wilson. Trevor Siemian stinks. I'm not trying to sit here and sell you that Trevor Siemian's any good, but he's better than Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson is the worst quarterback to ever play football over an expanded period of time. Guys who have played this poorly the way Zach Wilson has, they don't get to play 3 games, 4 games, 5 games in the NFL. It's 3 years of this. It's just mind-blowing how the people at Florham Park just continuously trot him out there. Trevor Siemian needs to be activated for this game Sunday. And if there's 2 bad series, he's pulled. It's crazy. Every quarterback in the Zach Wilson era on the Jets has come in and played better than him. Josh Johnson did his rookie year. Joe Flacco, who's atrocious, who's better than Zach Wilson. Of course, Mike White was better than him. Literally every single quarterback that is not Zach Wilson is better than Zach Wilson. And they just continue to coddle him, which just makes no sense because Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh, I don't think are that bad of a GM and head coach combination. But this malpractice and incompetence to just continuously let him play should get them both fired. It really should. It's just embarrassing how this continues to happen week after week. And for a second consecutive year, you're wasting seasons of a great defense. There's just really not much more to say in regard to this team. But it is what it is with the quarterback position, with the Jets. Hopefully they make the change on Sunday Night Football. Now moving on to a team that very well could be making a quarterback change in the future. that is the New York Giants. Daniel Jones, he tore his ACL in Las Vegas this past week against the Raiders, and he's going to be out for the remainder of the season. It looks very likely that the Giants are well on their way to a top 3 to 5 pick in the upcoming NFL draft. So, Mark, is this the end for Daniel Jones in a New York Giants uniform?
It's not, because if the Giants, unless the Giants get a top 2 pick, then it's it for Daniel Jones. They're choosing Drake May or Caleb Williams. However, if they fall after the 2nd pick, Daniel Jones is their quarterback for the foreseeable future. I don't see how you justify taking Shedeur Sanders, starting him over Daniel Jones. I know we mentioned Penix in the past. I don't know how we justify having him start over Daniel Jones. Bo Nix as well. There's a lot of talented quarterbacks in this draft, but after May and Williams, I don't see how you justify having any of the other potential rookie quarterbacks for next season start over Jones, because Daniel Jones, whether you like it or not, is in the conversation among the top 5 Giants quarterbacks of all time. Now, a lot of that has to do with the great length of time that the Giants have had quarterbacks, a la Phil Simms and Eli Manning, but Jones has to be the guy unless they have May or Williams, because those are the guys you have to have start year 1. The others, not so much, and you should have Daniel Jones.
Yeah, I don't think it's the end of his career, because even if the Giants do get lucky and have a top 1 to 3 pick and they're able to get Caleb Williams or Drake May, I would still have Daniel Jones come back for next year and play the first 7-8 weeks. It'd be a similar situation to Kurt Warner and Eli Manning, where you bring Daniel Jones back, you don't have the rookie start right away, and once inevitably when
there's a major age difference between Daniel Jones and Kurt Warner. I mean, Kurt Warner was years into his career when Eli Manning was backing him up. Daniel Jones would only be in his 6th NFL season, still very young. I don't know if that's a similar situation if you want to go Favre and Aaron Rodgers. Also, another big age gap. So you either draft one of the top 2 quarterbacks or you're keeping Daniel Jones, and you go with an offensive line that you could build around, which a lot of Giants fans seem to want instead of a quarterback, which is so crazy if Caleb Jones is on the table, but that is what Giants fans seem to want.
Well, it remains to be seen, but if they are in a position to draft Caleb Williams or Drake May, they're going to draft them. And the Daniel Jones contract, he's going to be on the team next year. So regardless of that situation, he will be on the roster. They can get out of the contract after year 2. So it'll be a tough situation for their cap when you have Daniel Jones on your cap and a top 5 pick that's a quarterback. But if the Giants are in that position, they're going to be left with no choice. Now, if they have the 6th pick or the 7th pick, where they're in position to draft an offensive lineman or a Marvin Harrison Jr., sure, that could be a good alternative as well. It's just, do you believe in Daniel Jones? And that just brings up another question where I
don't know if it's so much that you believe in Daniel Jones or not. It's more so that if you have the 3rd pick or lower, is it worth having the team be built around in that stuff? Because I think if it's those top 2 quarterbacks, you have to go with that. But beyond that, Daniel Jones is your best option. So Marvin Harrison Jr. would be a major upgrade. Marvin Harrison Jr. is available. The Giants have to go for him. But I think the bigger question is, where do you go with building around Daniel Jones? Because once you have pick 3, that's the option. You have to build around Jones at that set because he is young enough. He is one of the best Giants quarterbacks. And I think that's kind of where the Giants are at right now.
Remains to be seen what the future holds for the New York Football Giants and Daniel Jones. But now moving on to another team that I'm sure is going to get Mark all fired up. That's his beloved New York Yankees. And earlier this week, the owner, Hal Steinbrenner, and general manager, Brian Cashman, had very, very interesting press conferences. You can just go over a whole list of things that those two had to say in regards to Al Steinbrenner saying the Yankees need to bunt more, Brian Cashman saying that everything that we have going on is pretty effing good. And Brian Cashman says we have the smallest analytics department in the American League East, which I don't know if that's a ringing endorsement of how you're running an operation. Mark, have the New York Yankees, and specifically Hal Steinbrenner and Brian Cashman, just completely lost all touch of reality in regards to their franchise?
I mean, they have lost reality, not just with the comments, but more so going into the 2019 season when they chose not to get Bryce Harper. Bryce Harper wanted to be a New York Yankee. Bryce Harper, one of the best young promising players in baseball, and then not to go after him because you have 6 other outfielders on the roster made no sense. Not to talk to him as well is embarrassing in addition to that. However, the World Series winners, the Texas Rangers, last week, which we didn't really get to break down too much since we did not do a show last week.
Who cares?
Well, it does matter when it comes to the Yankees because you have Corey Seager winning his second World Series MVP after they chose Anthony Volpe over him. You have Nathan Eovaldi pitching in the World Series winning clinching game after the Yankees gave up on him due to injuries. And it's not like he figures it out with one team wins a World Series. He did it twice with the Boston Red Sox and the Texas Rangers. So when you have Seager and Eovaldi, and then you also have Jordan Montgomery on top of that, it's trade for Harrison Bader, that's got to be a major, major wake-up call for Brian Cashman and Hal Steinbrenner. And it's very clear that they just don't care. And why should the fan base as well?
Well, I feel like I'm going to be a little even angrier than you when it comes to Brian Cashman, because quite frankly, the arrogance that he had at this press conference was just so galling to me. He just thinks he's better than everyone else. And you could just tell over the years. And I always just look at Brian Cashman when he does press conferences. He just looks like a guy who thinks he's better than everyone else. He doesn't dress like a baseball executive anymore. He dresses like he's like a socialite walking down the streets of New York City, just thinking he owns everybody. And honestly, he probably does feel that way because he knows he has a job for life with the New York Yankees. But it's just pathetic how they have continuously run their franchise like it's just corporate America. You would honestly think that Hal Steinbrenner and Brian Cashman, they're just working in the top corporate offices at a company like American Express, where they just don't care about any of their clientele. And for this case, the fans...
That's a shot at American Express. They don't care about the clientele.
I'm just talking about
profits
and
generating revenue and creating a dividend for their shareholders, which is what the Yankees care about. Revenue, profits. Creating
That's all they care about.
Distributions for the partial owners of the team, which, by the way, the Yankees do have. A lot of people forget about that. There's a lot of random families that own stakes in the Yankees. And that's what they care about right now. They do not care about putting a winning product in the team. And until they do, fans will start caring again. But right now, that's why fans are really losing interest in the New York Yankees. And it's impossible to get into the Mets because we'll get into that. They're an even bigger joke.
Oh, taking a shot. Honestly, at this point, say what you will about the Mets, they haven't done things well over the past several years, but they are making, in my opinion, the most conscientious effort to actually try to improve their team to go win a World Series. Hal Steinbrenner and Brian Cashman, it's just like they're just pleasing clients.
How does that make you feel knowing that since the Steve Cohen era, the Yankees have won a postseason series and the Mets still have not? It's got to make you feel pretty bad.
It's a totally different topic of conversation. It's a matter of...
The Yankees, without trying, are able to do so, and the Mets can't. The Yankees could finish over 500, and the Mets can't do so.
Well, this is just your little syndrome when it comes to worrying about the Mets. I'm worried about the Yankees and how they are trying to put together a World Series product. But you just said that
the Mets are putting such an effort into building a great product, and yet the Yankees are still putting together a better product. And they have 2 of their top guys literally asleep at the wheel.
Okay. It's I'm a Met fan, and I'm trying to talk about the Yankees, and all you're thinking about is the Mets. I'm literally thinking about every Yankee fan who calls up WFAN, who's a hardworking fan who tries to pay big dollars to go see their team potentially win a World Series, how they can improve their team and get back to the days of spending big money in which that enabled them to win a 2009 World Series. That's the only thing I care about when it comes to the Yankees. I'm a Met fan. It's just amazing. And look, this is a totally different topic of conversation, but because you wanted to chime in, and I'll chime in on it. Yankee fans just care too much about the Mets, which just boggles my mind. The Mets don't win, and you guys do, and you worry about the Mets.
Well, because the Mets fans come to town with Steve Cohen, and it's all, you're not going to have a winning team anymore. What's the point of being a Yankees fan? And then guess what happens? They're an embarrassment. So it's like, why do we have to focus on you? There's not a need to focus on the Mets, but it's just when stuff like this happens, with the way the Steve Cohen era has happened, it's hard not to chuckle.
I didn't even bring up Steve Cohen. See, well, you're not a Giant fan, but Yankee fans and Giant fans think the exact same way when it comes to the Mets and the Jets. It's just the same lazy argument. Well, laugh at the Mets. They're an embarrassment. They're never going to do anything positively. It's like, we don't care. Met fans and Jet fans, they just care about how their team is going to continue to get better. And Yankee fans and Giant fans think that the Mets and Jet fans are arrogant. That's just total bullshit. How can Met fans and Jet fans be arrogant? Our team never wins. That's why I say the argument is so lazy and outdone.
There was a certain gravitas Mets fans had that they never had before, and it was going along with the decline of the Yankees. And that's why it's hard not to laugh at when the Mets can't finish 500 or can't win a postseason series. Yeah, I'm going to get Max Scherzer and had Jacob deGrom at one point, and yet they go to the Texas Rangers and win a World Series in year one. There's a lot. I mean, both New York baseball teams are a joke. It's hard to say that one is doing so much better than the other, even though I said that the Yankees still have much better, and that's the math. But still, the end of the line, both New York baseball teams are a flat-out joke, and it really sucks that our football teams are not good too.
Well, it sucks, but the Mets, when it comes to percentage of effort going all in to try to win, the Mets are at 100% with Steve Cohen. The Yankees with Hal Steinbrenner, they're not even close to 70%. Look, you can make fun of the Mets and the fans all you want, but at the end of the day, the Mets are trying, and that's all you can ask for. Most of the time, it doesn't work. I understand that. The Mets are our cursed franchise. I know what the Mets are, but you got to keep trying. What are you going to just do? Fold up shop and just say, oh, well, Shohei Ohtani is available. Let's not get him because Shohei Ohtani's arm will fall off and he'll stop learning how to hit once he comes to the Mets.
Don't go for a guy like Shohei Ohtani or
It'll happen, but
or anything like that.
You got to keep trying.
The expectations have to be there for every time. You should go after every player. You should go and make the smartest draft decisions. Yes. But it's hard to remain optimistic. And as a quote-unquote Jets fan, I know that going in. You keep thinking what's the worst that could happen to Aaron Rodgers. You just have to have that expectation. And it's hard not to laugh at Jets fans and Mets fans when they have such high expectations, knowing it's going to be Murphy's Law of whatever goes up always comes down.
That usually is true. But at the end of the day, if you don't have hope, then what do you have? I mean, you got to try.
There's a difference between hope and delusion.
Well, delusion may be.
All right, let's go to Carlos Mendoza. Let's talk Carlos Mendoza.
We can talk about Carlos Mendoza another. Delusion is the case of where Aaron Rodgers may be coming back to play this year. That's more of a case of delusion. But when it comes to the Yankees, your hope, and I know it's not going to happen, but Yankee fans should have this expectation and goal because they still are the New York Yankees this offseason to sign Yoshinobu Yamamoto, sign Cody Bellinger.
Not going to happen. May happen.
Yeah. And try to trade for one.
Yankee fans shouldn't want Cody Bellinger. And I'll tell you what. Look at Cody Bellinger's numbers in 2021 and 2022. He was terrible. A below average player in the major leagues. Then has a monster season while on a 1-year deal heading into what is obviously a contract season because it is a 1-year deal. You don't get guys like that are coming off such a high and hope to have outrageous expectations. If the Yankees can get a very team-friendly deal, fine. Bellinger's the guy. And it's great. You hear that the Yankees talk to him. Wow, that's one more talk than they've had with Bryce Harper. Whoop-de-doo. But don't get too excited. And don't say that Cody Bellinger, because there's going to be a lot of teams that are not going to go for Cody Bellinger because they're smart and they know that he's going to demand a lot of money after the season he had.
But when it comes to the Yankees, okay, if it's not Cody Bellinger, the Yankees' expectations, what they should do this offseason is when you talk about Yamamoto, Bellinger, or trading for Juan Soto, the Yankees should end up with 2 of those 3. But they're not the old New York Yankees anymore. And it's a shame that they're just not willing to go to that.
Oh, come on. If they trade for Juan Soto, you're telling me that's not an incredibly successful offseason? A guy that's not even 25 years old yet.
You got to sign him.
Acquire him.
You got to sign him.
Trade the entire team for him. And the reason why I say the entire team for him is because he is worth trading the entire team for if you can. Everyone should be on the table when it comes to Juan Soto, except for Garrett Cole and Aaron Judge. Juan Soto is that talented. And for those who say, oh, he's not worth trading every player for. Yes, he is. He's a modern-day Ted Williams.
But when it comes to the Yankees, the last time they won the World Series, which was 2009, in one offseason, they got CeCe Sabathia, Mark Teixeira, and AJ Burnett. What I'm saying is the Yankees need to get multiple stars. That's the last time they won the World Series. The Yankees need to go back.
No. That is
Yankees.
True. But Juan Soto,
Yankees.
To get a player at that age with the horizon that he has, and he hasn't reached his peak yet, that would be an incredibly successful offseason. But just having Juan Soto isn't going to win you a World Series.
No.
The problem is that the way that the Yankees have been is they'll get a star player and then coast for a year or two and not make the needed adjustments. Giancarlo Stanton, there really wasn't that much they did around then. Garrett Cole, 2 years after that, really not much they did. They tend to get one guy in coast instead of continuously trying to build a winning team. And it's not about spending money. It's making the right decisions. Like Jordan Montgomery for Harrison Bader was not the right decision. And clearly, on all accounts, because Jordan Montgomery helps the Texas Rangers win the World Series, which is why I mentioned that was so important. And Harrison Bader is no longer with the New York Yankees. Grabbing Rougned Odor and getting rid of Dario Estrada, it's like little moves like that just hurt this franchise. And it just shows that it's not just when Brian Cashman has an open wallet, he's a great GM. Brian Cashman is not a good general manager whatsoever. There's a reason why he won just one World Series with his team in such a long time frame, because he is not a good general manager.
And the only way they can get out of making bad decisions and him not being a good general manager is by spending a boatload of money, and they simply won't do it. So
yeah, but it's not. But like Montgomery and Bader, that trade, that's not a money thing. That's just stupidity. Not getting Corey Seager and saying Anthony Volpe is going to be the answer. That is stupidity. Not going for Bryce Harper, saying you have 6 outfielders. That is stupidity. There's a way you could say that money has to do with that, but it's just the development issues, not getting a third baseman after A-Rod retired. There's just a lot of signs that show that from development to the smart trades to even the draft, because aside from Aaron Judge in the last 10 years, their drafts really haven't been that, and Anthony Volpe, their drafts really haven't been that impressive. And Cashman is just not a good general manager, and the game has really passed him by. The longest tenured GM after Brian Cashman's Mike Rizzo for the Washington Nationals. He at least won a World Series a few years ago.
He's the Pope. Brian Cashman's the Pope. He's going to be the Yankees general manager until the day he dies. So remains to be seen. But Mark wanted to bring up the Mets while we were talking about the Yankees. So let's move on to the Mets. They made some news this week. They hired a new manager, Carlos Mendoza, shocking some people, which a lot of people thought it was going to be Craig Counsell. Didn't end up being him. Mark, should Met fans, I don't even know why I'm asking you this question, how should Met fans feel But why don't I ask it anyway? Should Met fans like the hire of Carlos Mendoza, Mark? What do you have to say about how Met fans should feel? Go for it.
I don't want to knock Carlos Mendoza because I do not know what type of manager Mendoza is. But I do have two major concerns with this hire for the Mets. One, we don't know what David Stearns is without Craig Counsell. David Stearns, when he was the general manager for the Milwaukee Brewers, only had Craig Counsell as his manager. So we don't know if it's really more Stearns or Counsell. And it would be nice and comforting for Met fans to have both. Plus, with Mendoza, this is not Willie Randolph coming straight from the Yankees to the Mets. Willie Randolph was with the Yankees coaching staff for many winning seasons. Mendoza simply said, based on my rants from a few minutes ago, was not. So it's not anything about Mendoza personally, because we don't know his managerial experience. And there's a lot of people that are saying, oh, why fire Buck when you end up with Carlos Mendoza over Craig Counsell? It's simple. Buck and David Stearns are not going to get along. You lose that on Counsell, which does stink. And you hope that Mendoza could be better with the young players because it seems like anyone could. Then Buck Showalter. So it's tough to knock on Carlos Mendoza. It's tough not to root for Mendoza. But it feels like the Mets got the wrong guy after they hired David Stearns.
Look, at the end of the day, you trust David Stearns. If Met fans are so happy about the hire of David Stearns a few weeks ago, and you're mad about the hiring of Carlos Mendoza, it just doesn't make sense. Look, you lost out on Craig Counsell. Craig Counsell clearly did not want to come to New York. He got the most money he can while staying relatively close to home by going to the Chicago Cubs. So you can't force a guy to come to New York when he clearly didn't want to be here. Now, I think David Stearns was much more the brains of the operations of the Milwaukee Brewers than Craig Counsell was. So that's a different topic of conversation for another day. I think David Stearns is a brilliant mind, and you could just get that.
The topic of conversation is right now. Why is David Stearns more valuable than Craig Counsell? Craig Counsell is the one that's on the field. Craig Counsell is the one that's making the adjustments. Why are you knocking Craig Counsell so much? Now is the time to have this conversation.
David Stearns brought in Corbin Burns. He brought in Brandon
one
pitcher. Two pitchers. Brandon Woodruff, Corbin Burns, Freddie Peralta. He made the trade for Freddie Peralta. He made the trade for Willie Adames. He's the one who's made the trades. He built that great bullpen with the Milwaukee Brewers. David Stearns built that operation. Craig Counsell didn't build the operation. He's a good manager.
Craig Counsell did nothing? Craig Counsell is one of the winningest managers in baseball for the last 10 years.
David Stearns is more of the mastermind to the operation of the Milwaukee Brewers than Craig Counsell was. It's not the end of the world.
They've been together for the same amount of time, and Counsell's been with the Milwaukee actually longer. Stearns' only manager was Counsell. So I don't think you could really separate one or the other just so. Unless Stearns went elsewhere, but Stearns has only been the general manager of the Milwaukee Brewers before. So it's hard to really separate the two of them. I'm not knocking David Stearns. I'm just saying it is very hard to separate the two of them, and it would be more comforting for Met fans to have Craig Counsell as a manager.
It'd be more comforting, but I'm not losing sleep over the hire of Carlos Mendoza just yet. Got to give him a chance, and you got to give him some time. This can't be a scenario where if he doesn't look like he's great on the job, you fire him after 2 years. This has to be the start of a long era. Now, I'm not saying
unless he puts together the wrong lineup card like Mickey Callaway did.
Well, if that's the case, then we have problems on our hands. But you know what? You're not firing a guy after 2 years because you'll just never be able to hire anybody. The Mets have been going through managers and general managers like sink water over the past decade. The Stearns-Mendoza era has to be for a minimum of 3 years. Stearns is going to be here for a long time. I'm confident in that. But you have to let this thing ride out. The Mets are a team that they're always going to be in win now mode, but this year is a little bit more of a transitional year. So no one is on the hot seat, obviously, this year, and no one will be on the hot seat in year 2. You have to just let this thing ride out because this pairing Stearns and Mendoza, in my opinion, is the unofficial true beginning to the Steve Cohen era. Because when he took over, you had Luis Rojas, you got rid of him, you hired Buck Showalter. You knew that was short-term all the way around, even if it was just for 2 or 3 years. You knew that was short-term. You didn't have the president of baseball operations running the show the first 3 years of the Cohen ownership. So now the slate is clean. You have your head baseball man in David Stearns. You hire Carlos Mendoza, and now it's time to go to work. See how the Mets can continue to build up their farm system, and while also having the resources that Steve Cohen has and supplementing it through free agency. I think it's an exciting time to be a Met fan because there's reasons to be more optimistic and more forward thinking as an organization. And that's the biggest reason why I am a huge fan of David Stearns over the Craig Counsell hire. I'm not losing sleep over Craig Counsell. So the biggest
Craig Counsell took the Brewers to the playoffs.
I'd rather have Stearns
than the GM this season.
I'd rather have Stearns than Counsell. It's not even.
Right.
I wouldn't even think.
I can't tell the difference between the two of them. So that's just me.
Remains to be seen, but I'm much happier that David Stearns is with the New York Mets over Craig Counsell. Now, moving on to our favorite segment of the show, with it or not with it, a very popular TV show, White Lotus, that was on not too long ago, won't be coming back until 2025. So, Mark, is the wait for season 3 of White Lotus with it or not with it?
If White Lotus is more like season 1 than season 2, then yes. If it's more like season 2 than it is season 1, then no.
It's definitely not with it. I
come on.
I mean, I always thought the show, I didn't even watch season 1.
So then how can you have an opinion on White Lotus in total if you didn't watch season 1 and you only watch season 2? After the game, start season 1. Start season 1.
I'm not
season
watching
1 is one of the best storytellings of this century. Watch season 1 and then come back next week and tell me whether you're excited or not for White Lotus.
Well, people said season 2 was even better than season 1. I watched season 2.
They're idiots because it was more pressing on a day-to-day basis. White Lotus season 1 had so much more meaning to it and so much more thoughtfulness to it. Mike White is a true genius, and season 1 has proved that. Season 2 is just thrilling and edge week by week. Season 1, binge it, and then tell me what you think of it and tell me what you think the whole season means. And if you understand it correctly, you'll love it. If you don't understand it and you just think it's about a murder, you won't like it.
Look, I think season 2 of White Lotus, it's a good show, but the hype was overblown. It's a good show.
Watch season 1.
I'm not watching.
Do me a favor and watch season 1.
I'm not going.
All right, so I'm not taking your opinion seriously then.
Well, you wanted to talk about
it's got Alexandra Daddario and Sydney Sweeney. If those aren't 2 names to get you to start watching it, I don't know what is. On top of a great story.
Remains to be seen, but
remains to be seen.
The wait that long, it's definitely not worth it. If come up with the show in the summer of 2024. I mean, you could go to Thailand and film it over the next 4 or 5 months and have it air in the summer or fall of 2024. You don't have to wait that long, but whatever. It is what it is. I don't think it's with it. Mark thinks it's with it. But that's all the time we have on We're Not Doing a Podcast. For Mark, this is Jarrett signing off. Have a good night. We'll see you next week.